Forensic psychiatric nursing. Just looking at some criminal statistics and facts, over 2 million individuals with mental illnesses are incarcerated. Back in 2014, 20% of inmates in jails and 15% of inmates in state prisons had a serious mental illness. In 2020, it was decided that it was stated that more than 50% of all prisons and jail inmates have a mental health problem. 44% of them were jail inmates, 37 were prison inmates. When we think about the criminal justice process, there are two sides when it comes to that. There's when it comes to an arrest or a conviction. There's the one side that's presented by the attorney and the other side is presented by the prosecutor. And it's important that the accused be represented by an attorney, especially if they have a mental illness. So when we think about it, what's the basic concept underlying the criminal judicial process? Well, it's answered here. The process really stands on understanding that individual's fitness to stand trial. Now, fitness means that the person is able to consult with a lawyer, they are able to participate with a degree of rational understanding. But when they're unfit to stand trial, that person must, I'm gonna say, when they're unfit to stand trial, in order to stand trial, they must be able to communicate with the counsel and assist in the defense. If they're not able to do that, then they're unfit to stand trial. Then you have the not guilty by reason of insanity, and make sure that if you get an opportunity to look that up, understand what not guilty by reason of insanity means. Other terms taken into consideration is legal sanity, be able to distinguish between the right from wrong. Legal insanity is the presence of a major mental disorder like schizophrenia, where they have command hallucinations, or have irresistible impulses, like they knew the act was wrong, but they couldn't control their behavior. So what the priority is going to be at this point, especially when it comes to assessment, is asking questions such like, tell me about what you were thinking at that time. And so when we take all of this information and we think about it, understanding that one, the prison system, the forensic, when it comes to forensic nursing, the judicial system is the one that runs and decides how nursing is going to be managed. But then when we go into caring for an individual, it is important that we think about these terms, understand what they are as it relates to whether or not your patient is ever going to be able to go to the trial to defend themselves, and then actually what that means. And that in order for a patient to be able to go to trial, they have to be able to engage in their own defense. And then in that moment when they are being defended or standing up for themselves, the assessment question that's best to ask, especially as a forensic nurse, is tell me about what you were thinking at that time. Guilty but mentally ill means that they are competent to proceed, but that the defendant's present thinking at the time of the trial has put them in a situation where they can't. So they were guilty, they knew what they were doing, but now they're mentally ill. Going back to the guilty but mentally ill, there comes along with this as part of the process a criminal conviction. These individuals are sent to the correctional system, and the accused knows what's right, the difference between from what's right and wrong. If that person is put on probation, it's a conditional or a revocable release in which there are certain criteria that the individuals must meet with the supervision of a probation officer. And then you have your forensic conditional release program where the patients are discharged, but they're monitored on an ongoing basis either by the court system or some type of conditional criteria that they must maintain in order to keep that discharge status. Perspectives related to mental illness and criminal behavior is really important, especially on the part of the nurse, as it can impact the care they provide. It's important to understand that there are people that do believe that people with mental illness commit criminal acts because of the mental illness. There are some that believe that people engage in criminal behaviors be, may also happen to be mentally ill. Others believe that after being committed to jail, a person may develop or have an exacerbation of their mental illness, such as depression or intermittent explosive disorder. Stigma is magnified for your forensic patients as a result of either that mental illness or the criminal act that they committed. Stigmas can lead to reluctancy on the part of not only the mental health professional to treat the patient, but also on the part of the individual to want to receive assistance. It's definitely difficult when you realize that the person that you're caring for has engaged in an act of murder or child sexual abuse. Oftentimes, clinicians express safety concerns for themselves and other patients and may refuse care. But it's because of these facts and these things that we're taking into consideration that there is one thing that RN must do first. And let's see what that is. It's engage in self-awareness. Self-awareness, we've been talking about probably a good bit. And it's essential, and it's also an ongoing process that has to happen where we review our beliefs and our attitudes about the patient, about crimes, recognizing what our biases are. It is going to be the first step towards being an effective nurse. And if you choose to go into psychiatric nursing, then to be an effective psychiatric nurse in a forensic setting, you always have to engage, always constantly. And then making sure that you maintain professional boundaries and seek assistance if you're not able to do so. Forensic nursing is a type of nursing that really provides care for individuals who are victims of crimes or perpetrators of crimes. Consultation services is a way that forensic nurses do most of their work, whether it be in nursing, medical, or law-related agencies. Consultation services are there. Expert court testimony, offering input on policy changes, offering evaluation services for inmates, and bringing together not only your traditional nurse practice, but also your forensic knowledge, and using that to better serve not only those who are the victims, but those who are the perpetrators. When we look at forensic nursing, there are two aspects that a nurse could choose to go into, and that's your forensic nurse generalist and your advanced practice forensic nurse. When we look at your forensic psychiatric nurse, they can be entry-level RN nurses, BSN, ASN diploma. They evaluate what the intent is of the perpetrator and determine if they had diminished capacity at the time of the crime. They engage in evidence collecting. They work as competency evaluators, which means they spend hours with the defendant, carefully looking over documents as well. The forensic nurse provides assessment data that can help make final diagnosis. However, the nurse does not determine whether or not the patient is guilty or innocent. The role of the forensic nurse can come in different forms, whether it be a nurse psychotherapist who provides individual, family, and group therapy. You can have your forensic nurse examiner who does court-ordered evaluations of an individual's sanity or competency to proceed in court cases, and also give expert opinions. They reconstruct the defendant's mental state and motives at the time of the crimes. Now, when it comes to the competency evaluator, their role and making sure that we understand this and pay attention to this aspect, is that they assess mental health or illness. They conduct interviews. They provide documentation. They complete formal reports to courts, and they testify as expert witnesses. And so because of this, they spend a lot of time looking over information. They spend a lot of time delving in, and making and putting their reports together and spending that time with the patient. Facts and expert witnesses is also something that a forensic nurse can do. They can be a fact witness who testifies to what was personally seen, heard, or performed or documented during the patient's care, or they can serve as an expert witness that testifies for maybe malpractice cases. You can see also a consultant, a hostage negotiator, or a criminal profiler. And with your criminal profiler, they compile information on what type of person it would take to be in order to commit that particular crime. So now you're going to manage the care of a patient as a forensic nurse. It's going to be important to do an assessment, develop a rapport, do risk management, and early recognition. We also need informed consent. Informed consent before they even treat it with medication. We also want to collaborate with the psychiatrist to educate the patient about medication and the need to take them. Other specific interventions include court process counseling, physical management of aggression, and medication adherence. With your correctional nurse, this is defined by the location of the work or the legal status of that patient. Significant part of the job is basically just providing treatment and services to inmates, especially those with chronic mental health diagnosis. Things that can be barriers or that can create issues within the correctional system, again, is the fact that these correctional systems are regulated by the judicial system. Nurses are held to the same standard of care, though, regardless of what setting they're in. It's just that the circumstances are just a little bit different. Medication is administered through a window or an opening of bars. Forensic patients can refuse medications just like your non-forensic patients can. But the nurse can administer an emergency medication under direction and order of the psychiatrist. Nursing care is more like a call line system, so it is more or less of you call for meds, they line up, and then they come get them, or you're passing them through the window and an opening through bars. So what is your role as a forensic nurse should you choose this path? It's about the identification of victims, the creation of treatment plans, and the collection and documentation and preservation of any evidence that is collected. Your SANE nurse is the one who cares for the adult and pediatric victims of sexual assault. SANE training courses are typically 5 days and about 40 contact hours. Another duty that nurses can do includes a nurse coroner or death investigator. Public officials are charged with the duty of determining how and why people die, and they have to assess the deceased through understanding the evidence, doing discovery, preserving the evidence, and then using that evidence. So here's a question. Insanity is the medical term that applies to mental illness. Is that true or false or not sure? Let me know what you guys are thinking. Another audience response question. A person charged with murder was found guilty but mentally ill. This individual, is it A, will spend the rest of his life in a psychiatric facility, B, will spend the rest of his life in a prison, or C, may be eligible for parole? And I think that answer is C.